now going to look at solving equations with variables on both sides. When there are variables on both sides of an equation, you're just going to follow one other step before you get to solve the equation. So step 1, distribute. Step 2, combine like terms. Step 3, get your variables to one side and your numbers, your constants, to the other. Step 4, do your inverse operations. Okay, so from here, let's go ahead and look at some examples. So step 1 is to distribute. Well, in this case, for number 1, I don't have to do any distribution. Step 2 is to combine like terms. Well, in this case, looking on both sides of my equal sign, 11x and negative 3, I can't combine anything over here. And 7x and 25, I cannot combine anything over there. So therefore, step 2 is also done. Step 3, get your variables to one side of the equal sign and your numbers to the other. So in this case, I'm going to start with my variables. So I have an 11x and a 7x. I'm going to move the 7x over to this side. Since it's positive, in order to get it to the other side, I need to subtract it. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. 11x minus 7x is 4x. And the 7x and the negative 7x cancel. Our next step is to get all of the numbers, or the constants, to the other side. Well, in this case, negative 3, in order to get that to 25, since it's a negative, we can add it. And we get 4x equals 28. Our last step is to do the inverse operation. In order to do the inverse operation, well, in this case, it's 4 times x equals 28. So in order to get rid of the 4, instead of multiplying by 4, our inverse operation would be to divide by 4. Here we get x equals 7. Let's go ahead and move on to some examples on the next page. Let's look at example number 5, or number 4, sorry. Example number 4. Step 1, remember, is to distribute. So let's start with that. So we have 5 times 2x is 10x, 5 times 4 is 20. And then distribute on this side. 4 times 3x is 12x, 4 times 7 is 28. So step 1 is done, we distributed. Step 2 is to combine like terms. Well, in this case, again, we don't have any terms that we can combine on either side of the equal sign. So we have to work on our next step, which is to get all our variables to one side and numbers to the other side. Fun fact, does not matter which side you get them to. Either one is going to work. I would say your goal would always be to try and keep the variable positive. So in this case, if I want to work with the variable first, I have 10x and 12x. Rather than subtracting 12x to this side and getting negative 2x, I'm going to try and keep my variable positive, just because it's going to be easier for me in the end. So instead of subtracting 12x, I'm going to subtract 10x to both sides, so that way I can get my variables to one side, right? Because this is going to cancel. And I get 20 equals 2x plus 28. Now I need to get my numbers to the other side. So 20 is already over here, but I still have a 28. So how do I get the 28 to the other side? I'm going to subtract it because it's positive and you need to do the reverse operation. In this case, 20 minus 28 is negative 8 equals, this is going to cancel, 2x. From here, negative 8 equals 2x. Well, how do you solve for x? What is happening to x? It's being multiplied by 2, so I need to divide both sides by 2, and I get that x is equal to negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. Moving on to, let's do example number 6. Example 6. Step 1 is to distribute, but there's no distribution here. There are no parentheses. So then we move on to step 2, which is to combine like terms on either side of my equal sign. Well, 3x and negative 25 cannot be combined, but we have 11x, negative 5, and 2x, and over here I see that 11x and 2x can be combined to get 13x. From here, we follow our same steps. Get our variables to one side, numbers to the other side. Remember, our goal is to keep our variables positive, so instead of subtracting 13x to the other side, I think I'm going to subtract 3x to this side. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Keep in mind, you are only subtracting the terms that are the same. I'm not subtracting the 3x from the 5. I'm only subtracting it from the 13x because they have the same variable. Okay, they are like terms. You can only subtract when you have like terms. So negative 25 equals 10x minus 5. Now get all of our numbers to the other side. Well, negative 25 equals 10x minus 5, so let's add 5 to both sides. Remember, since it's negative, in order to get it onto the other side, you're going to add it. Negative 25 plus 5 is negative 20, which equals now just 10x because this canceled out. In order to solve, we need to do the inverse operation. So we have 10 times x. In order to do the inverse operation, instead of multiplying, we need to divide. So x is going to equal, well, these cancel, and negative 20 over 10 is negative 2. We're going to go ahead and also look at number 3, and then we will be done. Number 3, step 1, distribute. There's no distribution here. Step 2, combine like terms. There are no terms to combine on either side. Step 3 is to get all of my variables to one side, numbers to the other side. So we're going to start with my variables. So we have a positive 1/2 x and a positive 3/4 x. I'm going to subtract 1/2 x to both sides. When you subtract fractions, so 3/4 x minus 1/2 x, you need to get what's called a common denominator. I cannot subtract 3/4 and negative 1/2 until I get a common denominator. In this case, my common denominator is going to be 4 because my 1/2 can be multiplied so that the bottom is 4. So I multiply by 2 over 2, and I get 3/4 x minus 2/4 x, which ends up being 1/4 x. Subtract the numerators, keep the denominators the same. So again, I subtracted the 1/2 x over, it cancels over here. But in order to subtract 1/2 x from 3/4 x, I needed to get a common denominator. Once I got a common denominator, I subtracted the numerators, kept the denominator the same, and then I can write the rest of my equation. Let's go ahead and bring it up here. We have 1/4 x minus 12 equals negative 6. Our next step is to get all of our numbers to the other side. We're going to do that by adding 12. And we get 1/4 x equals, well, negative 6 plus 12 is just 6. Last step is to do the inverse operation. Well, in this case, x is being multiplied by 1/4. So in other words, I would need to divide both sides by 1/4. But remember, when you divide by a fraction, it's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. Those cancel out, and I'm left with x is equal to, looks like 24 over 1. Remember, when you multiply fractions, multiply straight across.